Have you ever stopped to think about all the incredibly complex stuff happening inside your body right now? That sudden jolt of adrenaline, maybe, or just feeling hungry, or
Mhm.
even how you maintain a steady temperature without thinking about it.
It really is amazing, a kind of master orchestration going on constantly, behind the scenes.
Exactly. And that unseen symphony is what we're diving into today. Our plan is to, well, pull back the curtain on two big layers of this. First, how our metabolism, all those chemical reactions keeping us going, is so precisely controlled by hormones, how everything connects.
Right. Linking up all the different tissues and organs in mammals.
And then we'll zoom out even further. We'll look at the fundamental information pathways, DNA, RNA, proteins, the actual blueprints, the instruction manual for all this biological complexity.
And this deep dive, it's drawn from a core biochemistry text, the kind of material upper-level undergrads wrestle with. We're aiming to give you a bit of a shortcut, focusing on those molecular mechanisms, the pathways, how it all integrates. Hopefully with some clarity, memorable bits, and maybe a few aha moments.
Okay, let's jump in. We often discuss metabolism like it's just happening in one cell. But scaling that up to a whole organism with specialized parts, that's another level of complexity, isn't it? This whole division of labor idea.
It really is. And the key challenge becomes coordination. How do all these specialized bits work together? That's where hormones and nerve signals come in. They're the body's communication network.
Integrators.
Exactly. Coordinating metabolism across the whole system.
Yeah.
And it's not just us mammals. You see similar signaling systems in insects, worms, even plants. It's a fundamental trick for multicellular life.
So hormones specifically, what are they? Fundamentally, how do they operate?
Well, they're basically chemical messengers, small molecules, sometimes proteins, made in one place, released into the blood.
And then they travel to act somewhere else.
Precisely. They find specific receptors on their target tissues, like a key fitting a specific lock, and that triggers a change inside the cell. They regulate everything from blood pressure to hunger to how fuel gets used. Super broad roles.
How does that compare to, say, nerve signals? You mentioned those too.
Good question. Nerve signals using neurotransmitters are typically super fast and act over tiny distances, like across a synapse. Think milliseconds. Endocrine signals, hormones in the blood, are slower but can reach cells all over the body.
A broader broadcast.
Exactly. Though interestingly, some molecules like epinephrine adrenaline can actually be both. A neurotransmitter in one context, a hormone in another. The body is efficient.
Okay, so the hormone arrives, docks with its receptor. Then what? How does the cell get the message?
Right, so binding triggers an internal response. It could be activating a second messenger molecule inside, like CAN-MP, to spread the signal. Or it might activate proteins on the cell surface, or open ion channels, changing the cell's electrical state.
And some hormones go even deeper.
Yeah, steroid hormones, for instance. They can actually go right into the nucleus and directly change which genes are being turned on or off. That leads to slower changes, maybe hours or days, but often more profound ones.
And the amplification effect you mentioned earlier is just mind-boggling.
Oh, absolutely. One single molecule of epinephrine landing on a cell can trigger the release of, thousands, even millions of glucose molecules from storage. It's incredible leverage.
A tiny whisper becomes a huge shout.
Exactly. And you see this range and speed, too. Some hormones act in seconds, activating enzymes already there. Others, like those gene-regulating ones, take much longer.
And they travel differently, too. Endocrine, paracrine, autocrine.
Right. Endocrine is the long-distance bloodstream travel. Paracrine is signaling to nearby neighbors. Autocrine is the cell basically signaling itself. Different modes for different needs.
Can you give an example of how these are made? It's not always straightforward, is it?
No, often quite complex. Take insulin. It starts as a longer inactive chain called preproinsulin, gets folded and chopped to become active insulin, or an even more spectacular example, POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin. Yeah, one single precursor protein that, depending on how it's cut up by enzymes in different cells, can yield at least 9 different active peptide hormones, affecting appetite, stress response, pigmentation, all from one starting molecule. It's incredibly efficient processing.
Wow. So who's conducting this whole metabolic orchestra? Is there a hierarchy? A top-down control?
Definitely. The central nervous system, your brain, is constantly sensing the internal and external environment and orchestrating hormonal responses. The classic example is the stress response leading to cortisol.
Walk us through that one.
Okay. So stress signal hits the hypothalamus in the brain. It releases a hormone, CRH, CRH travels just a tiny distance to the pituitary gland, which then releases ACTH into the bloodstream.
Okay.
ACTH then travels to the adrenal glands, sitting on top of your kidneys, and tells them to release cortisol. And like we said, the amplification is huge. A tiny bit of CRH leads to a massive cortisol release, a million-fold increase, easily.
But it's not just orders coming down from the brain, right? There's feedback coming back up.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. It's a two-way street. Other tissues send signals back to the brain. Your fat tissue, for example, releases hormones called adipokines, like leptin and adiponectin.
What do they tell the brain?
Leptin basically signals how much fat storage you have. It generally acts to decrease appetite. Adiponectin helps sensitize tissues to insulin. Then you've got ghrelin from the stomach saying, I'm hungry, and PYY336 from the intestine saying, I'm full. It's constant communication.
Really drives home how interconnected everything is. Okay, let's zoom in on some specific organs. The liver, you called it the central hub. What makes it so special metabolically?
Oh, the liver is incredible. It's so versatile. It processes nutrients from your digestion, decides what to store, what to convert, what to release back into the blood for other tissues. It handles carbohydrates, fats, amino acids. It's central to everything.
How does it handle glucose, for example?
It has a special enzyme, glucokinase, which only really grabs glucose when levels are high. This is smart. It means the liver doesn't hoard glucose when supplies are low, letting the brain and muscles get what they need first.
A generous organ.
In a way, yes. Glucose coming into the liver can be stored as glycogen, burned for energy, turned into fat, or sent back out. It depends entirely on the body's needs at that moment.
And amino acids. Proteins.
Liver uses them to build its own proteins, sends them out, or if there's an excess, it breaks them down for energy or converts them to glucose or fat. It also safely converts the nitrogen waste from amino acid breakdown into urea, which we then excrete.
And lipids, fats.
The liver uses fats for its own fuel, primarily. But during fasting, it can convert fatty acids into ketone bodies. These are like portable fuel packets, especially important for the brain when glucose is scarce.
Okay, speaking of fats, adipose tissue. More than just storage depots.
Way more. White adipose tissue, yes, that's mainly for storing energy as fat droplets. Very efficient. But then you have brown adipose tissue, B-at-T, and also beige fat.
Ah, the ones that generate heat.
Exactly. They have a unique protein, UCP1, that essentially short-circuits the energy production process, releasing heat instead of making ATP. Great for keeping warm, especially for infants. And interestingly, exercise can actually trigger the formation of more of this good beige fat from white fat, partly via a hormone called irisin from muscle.
That is fascinating. So exercise literally changes the type of fat we have.
Yeah.
What about the muscles themselves? How do they get their energy for work?
Muscles are incredibly adaptable fuel users. At rest, they like fatty acids. During moderate exercise, they use both fatty acids and glucose, but for intense short bursts, like sprinting.
Glycogen.
Yep. Stored muscle glycogen is broken down very rapidly to lactate, generating ATP anaerobically without needing much oxygen right away. Plus, they have phosphocreatine, like an instant battery recharge for ATP, super quick energy buffer.
And that lactate doesn't just build up.
No, the Cori cycle handles that. Lactate goes from the muscle to the liver converts it back into glucose and sends it back to the muscle. It's a neat recycling system between organs.
What about the heart muscle? It's always working.
Right, the heart is different. It's almost purely aerobic, needs a constant oxygen supply. It mainly burns fatty acids, but uses glucose and ketone bodies too. It doesn't store much fuel, so consistent blood flow is absolutely critical for it.
And the brain.
Yeah.
Control center. You mentioned its glucose dependence.
Hugely glucose dependent. Uses about 20% of your oxygen at rest, despite being only 2% of your weight. Needs a constant glucose supply from the blood. If that drops too low, serious problems. Fast.
But it can adapt during starvation, you said. Ketone bodies.
Yes, thankfully. During prolonged fasting, when glucose is really scarce, the brain can switch to using ketone bodies, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate, for a large chunk of its energy needs. This spares muscle protein from being broken down just to make glucose, a vital survival mechanism.
And connecting all of this is the blood, the transport highway, carrying fuels, hormones, oxygen waste.
Exactly. And blood glucose itself is one of the most critical things the body regulates. It needs to stay in a pretty narrow range.
Which brings us to that hormonal dance regulating blood sugar. Insulin, glucagon.
Epinephrine and cortisol, the big four for glucose control.
So after a meal, blood sugar goes up, insulin steps in.
Right. Insulin is the fed state hormone. It tells muscle and fat cells to take up glucose using those GLUT4 transporters. It promotes storage glycogen in liver and muscle, fat and adipose tissue. The pancreatic beta cells that make insulin are amazing glucose sensors themselves.
How do they sense it?
Glucose enters the beta cell, gets metabolized, produces ATP. Higher ATP closes certain potassium channels, changing the cell's electrical charge, which opens calcium channels, and calcium rushing in is the trigger to release the stored insulin. It's a really elegant mechanism.
Okay, so what about when blood sugar dips?
Right.
Between meals or fasting?
That's glucagon's cue. It primarily targets the liver, telling it to break down stored glycogen and release glucose into the blood. It also ramps up gluconeogenesis, making new glucose, mainly in the liver. And it tells fat cells to release fatty acids, so other tissues use fat for fuel, saving glucose for the brain.
And if fasting goes on for a long time, starvation.
The strategy shifts. Liver glycogen runs out in about a day. Then fat becomes the main fuel source. If that runs low, the body reluctantly starts breaking down muscle protein for gluconeogenesis. Ketone bodies ramp up significantly, becoming that key alternative fuel for the brain.
But too many ketone bodies can be dangerous.
Yes, that's ketoacidosis. Ketone bodies are acidic, and if they build up too much, they can overwhelm the body's buffering systems and make the blood dangerously acidic. It's a serious complication, especially in untreated type 1 diabetes.
Okay, then there's epinephrine adrenaline, the fight-or-flight response.
Exactly. It's for immediate, acute stress. Mobilizes glucose from liver and muscle glycogen fast, gets fatty acids released, increases heart rate, prepares you for intense physical activity right now.
And cortisol, the other stress hormone.
Cortisol is more for chronic stress, acting slower via gene expression. It also raises blood glucose by promoting gluconeogenesis and breaking down protein, and mobilizes fats. It sort of counteracts insulin to ensure fuel is available during prolonged stressful periods. Imbalances, like Cushing's or Addison's disease, show how vital its balance is.
Okay, we've covered the short term. Let's talk long-term body weight regulation. Obesity is such a major issue now.
It really is. BMI definitions classify it, but the health risks, diabetes, heart disease, cancer are undeniable. Fundamentally, it's often an imbalance between calories in and calories out. But the body does have systems trying to regulate fat stores, kind of like a thermostat. A set point.
And leptin was a huge discovery there.
Massive. Leptin, made by fat cells, signals fat storage levels to the brain, generally reducing appetite. The obab mouse lacking leptin gets incredibly obese. Give it leptin, it slims down.
But it's not usually a simple leptin deficiency in human obesity, is it?
No, that's the key point. Most obese individuals have high leptin levels. The problem seems to be leptin resistance. The brain isn't responding properly to the signal. The stop eating message isn't getting through effectively.
What other signals are involved in this energy balance picture?
Well, there's adiponectin, also from fat cells, which improves insulin sensitivity. And inside cells, you have key sensors like AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase. Think of it as the cell's fuel gauge. When energy, ATP, is low and AMP is high, AMPK gets activated. It switches on pathways that generate energy, like burning fat, and switches off pathways that consume energy, like building molecules. It helps restore balance.
So it coordinates the cell's response to energy levels.
Exactly. And it often works in coordination with another complex called mTORC1, which is more involved in promoting growth when nutrients are plentiful. Then you have PPOs. Peroxisome proliferator activated receptors. These are transcription factors inside the cell nucleus that sense the presence of fats and activate genes involved in fat metabolism and storage. So your diet literally talks to your genes via these PPARs.
Incredible. And the short-term eating signals. Hunger and fullness.
Right. Ghrelin from the stomach screams, "Feed me," just before meals. PYY336 from the intestine after eating signals, "Okay, I'm full now." And then there are endocannabinoids.
The body's own cannabis-like molecules.
Yep. They tend to increase appetite, especially for palatable fatty foods, likely an evolutionary drive to seek out energy-dense food. And yes, that's the system that external cannabinoids from marijuana tap into, hence the munchies.
And now the gut microbiome. This huge community of bacteria in us influencing metabolism.
It's a super exciting area. These microbes aren't just passengers. They actively produce compounds like short-chain fatty acids from fiber fermentation that influence our own metabolism, fat storage, even insulin sensitivity. Some microbial profiles seem linked to obesity, others to leanness.
So manipulating the gut microbiome with probiotics or prebiotics could be a future strategy.
It's definitely being heavily researched. The potential is there, but it's complex. We're still figuring out the details.
This all ties into diabetes mellitus, where this regulation breaks down.
Exactly. Type 1 is the autoimmune destruction of insulin-producing cells. No insulin. Type 2 is primarily insulin resistance. The cells don't respond properly to insulin, often linked with obesity.
Symptoms like thirst, urination, glucose in urine.
Classic signs. And diagnostic tests like HbA1c measure long-term glucose control, while glucose tolerance tests see how your body handles a sugar load. The metabolic fallout is that cells starved for glucose rely heavily on fats, leading to those excess ketone bodies and the risk of ketoacidosis.
And for type 2, that insulin resistance. What's the current thinking on why it happens, especially with obesity?
A leading idea is this lipid toxicity or lipotoxicity. Basically, when fat cells get overstuffed, they become inflamed. This inflammation spills over, causing fat to accumulate in places it shouldn't, like muscle and liver. And that ectopic fat deposition messes up insulin signaling in those tissues.
Like a kind of metabolic traffic jam.
That's a good analogy. So management involves diet, exercise, which helps directly via AMPK and irisin and various drugs. Some boost insulin, some improve sensitivity, some affect glucose handling. And bariatric surgery can be remarkably effective, likely by altering gut hormones and resetting some of these signals.
Okay, we've covered this incredibly dynamic, moment-by-moment metabolic control. But underpinning all of it is the blueprint, the instructions.
Right.
Let's shift gears to those information pathways.
Right. The absolute foundation. Life needs two things: to copy its genetic information accurately, generation after generation.
Fidelity.
Exactly. But also, it needs the capacity for rare changes mutations to allow for evolution and adaptation. Stability plus flexibility.
And the core flow of this information is the central dogma.
That's the framework. DNA holds the master blueprint. Replication copies the DNA. Transcription makes an RNA working copy of a specific gene from the DNA. And translation uses that RNA message to build a protein on the ribosome. DNA to RNA to protein.
The ribosome being the protein factory.
Precisely. In bacteria, it's incredibly efficient. They start translating the RNA message even before the transcription process is finished and express them.
Why is building these information molecules, DNA, specific proteins, so much more expensive metabolically than just simple chemical reactions?
Great point. It's all about the cost of accuracy. Making a peptide bond is easy. Making its specific peptide bond, linking the correct amino acid in the correct position in a long chain based on a code. That requires a huge amount of machinery, hundreds of enzymes, RNAs, proteins, and significant energy input.
It's the cost of ensuring the information is right.
Exactly. You're not just making stuff, you're making specific functional information carriers. That complexity is the price of avoiding errors that could be catastrophic. Think of proofreading and error checking systems built into the process.
So DNA is the archive, RNA the messenger. But it's largely proteins doing the work of managing this information flow.
For the most part, yes. While RNA has some amazing catalytic and regulatory roles itself, proteins are the main catalysts and regulators for replication, transcription, translation. They're the enzymes, the structural components, the regulatory factors that make it all happen, and understanding this interplay is what allows us to do things like recombinant DNA technology.
And this whole system, it's incredibly ancient.
Unbelievably ancient. These core information pathways go back billions of years, likely to LUCA, the last universal common ancestor of all current life. The fact that we all share fundamental machinery like the ribosome is powerful evidence of common descent. It's like a molecular fossil record.
Wow. So when you really think about it, your body right now is this incredible product of billions of years of evolution. It's managing this complex metabolic symphony directed by hormones, all based on an ancient information system encoded in DNA.
It really is awe-inspiring, a constant balancing act between energy management and information integrity happening every single second.
Well, we hope this deep dive gave you some fresh insights, maybe a few aha moments into that biochemical symphony inside you. Thanks so much for joining us and being part of the Last Minute Lecture family.